And before I kind of move on to the next agenda item, I just wanted to see, because sometimes we have really inspiring thoughts over lunch, did anyone have anything else they wanted to add to this discussion about the Fair Library Access Resolution? Any other concerns or questions or thoughts? Okay. And I will just say, I mean, this is going to be an ongoing conversation, so if you think of something, don't hesitate to shoot me an email or give me a call. I would love to hear what you had to say. This conversation was really helpful for me, I think, in framing how best to use this and how best to kind of have this discussion with libraries, because we are going to talk a little bit at Federation meetings and at MLA, at conversations with commissioners. So thank you. It's a nice group to kind of start that conversation off. So the next thing we have on our agenda is the Digital Public Library of America, kind of the Simply E pilot. And some of you were able to join us in November, I believe it was, when Micah May from the Digital Public Library of America came, and he talked about the Simply E and Library E, or Library Simplified, I believe is the name of the middleware. The concept is basically librarians kind of pulling together to negotiate licensing that's, I guess, friendlier to libraries and how libraries use books for digital content. And it was also about maybe trying to combine different buckets of content. So like our Overdrive contract through Montana Library to Go, and maybe if we could work it out, the school library content and maybe free content, there would be different buckets that library customers could actually choose and select from. And so based on kind of your positive response and just based on some more follow-up with Micah May, we decided to go ahead and take up to $50,000 of coal tax money to try this pilot. And we want to include, if they are interested, the executive board will be listening in, I think, or deciding, but include Montana Library to Go, include non-MSC libraries, include MSC libraries. If it can work, maybe the school library Overdrive collection, and create and try out the Digital Public Library of America's ebook platform and see how it works. And so I sort of listed in here the goals of the pilot. But what I would love to know from you is, as you think about the libraries you represent and the people you serve, I'd love to know like what would be a successful project for you. Like maybe what the patron's experience would be like, what the librarian's experience would be like, what would be useful for you, and is there any data that you want us to collect? Because if I know about that at the front end, then I can make sure we set up the process to collect those things as we're going through this pilot. And so I'll go ahead and once again pull up a document so I can collect your thoughts on this as well. But I would love to know, what does success look like when it comes to this pilot? All right, I am ready.
Well, the two big things for me is that is it user friendly? Do users, can users use it to access their stuff on the same level? And how does it work for the selection for Montana Library to Go? How is this going to create? Is it going to create more work, less work, more streamlined?
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. I can touch on those too. Those are things I was immediately thinking about as well, just with our experience from Montana Library to Go. So on the one hand, what is the role of the public library going to be? Because I know with the Library to Go, a lot of people don't like the fact that they don't really have input into what the collection consists of. You know, because really we just told them, oh, you have to go to the Library to Go website and fill out a form, and then, you know, it might get selected. So like, they don't quite see why we, as their immediate help, can't do kind of more for them. And then, yeah, then I was also thinking from a professional standpoint and technical aspect, yeah, what is IT going to look like? How much are the frontline libraries and library staff going to need to know, especially when we're talking about pulling from a variety of sources or different you know, bins, as it were, of content. And then going back to it, like, how often are we going to have to just say, well, we need to contact Overdrive, we need to contact DPLA and have their IT solve it. So right now you're just kind of out of luck. Yeah, I don't know. That was the first concerns I thought of.
And so I think, you know, Cody, sounds like success would be that this is not going to create kind of some of that disconnect you currently have with Montana Library to Go, where sometimes the frontline library staff member can't solve the problem. Is that
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi Tracy, this is Hannah, if you can hear me. And I may have missed this in a previous SNAC meeting. Is this just for public libraries, or will any of the academic libraries who currently use Montana Library to Go be involved with the pilot as well?
Yep. I'm looking at Kara, but that was my thinking, that yes, they would be involved.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this, like what you would like to see from this, or what would be useful for you as librarians or for your patrons? Tracy?
Yeah, I have a question, and it might have been covered in the last meeting with Micah. I can't remember, but one thing my patrons really have a problem with, or like some of them use their Kindle and some of them use, and so they have to use different, like Libby doesn't work with, and Overdrive is clunky, and so is it going to be more streamlined to where one platform will cover all of the devices, or are there going to have to be multiple platforms?
That's a really good question. I think it's one app. Do you remember? Did Micah cover that?
I think it's one app too, and device agnostic, but that's a good question to clarify. Okay. I'm sure I've heard at some point, but I don't recall for sure.
I don't know if it will. I was unclear. Will it deliver to a Kindle Paperwhite? Like, I don't know. That's because my understanding was that Overdrive was the only one that had that capability.
Yeah, it probably doesn't support Kindle unless they get some kind of.
Yeah, so we're going to have patrons that are cranky because they can't use this. Is that right? Overdrive is one of the licensed providers.
Right.
Then why wouldn't it support Kindle?
Well, so you can put the app on certain Kindles, but some people want it delivered to their Paperwhite or to their things that don't take apps. And my understanding is that the Overdrive app is the only app that has that capability to send it to Amazon and then come through.
Right. Yeah. The intent of this
Right.
platform is to be an integrated platform, not to deliver content to another platform.
And some patrons don't like them. But
yeah, that's a good distinction.
okay, I've never used a Kindle. How many types of Kindles are there? I thought there's
Like
just one.
1 million. Yes, way too many to count.
So there's probably 8, maybe going on? Because there's kinds that have apps, and then there's kinds that are just for the teenagers.
And there's kinds for kids. And there's,
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's a good question. Is there anything else, like data-wise, that you're like, could you collect this at the beginnings, or start through the process? like if you were analyzing this, visualize this, you're analyzing the project kind of in 6 months from when it started. What's some of the information you would want me to share with you? Does that help? Kind of in the...
So as I read the memo, and I saw a focus on state publications and that content, I would hope that we would see a tremendous increase in the amount of, people who are accessing and using that valuable content.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things we talked about with Micah was the impact that using a platform like this might have on the false issue by surfacing other kinds of content, like the public domain content.
We hope it's alleviate maybe some of the problems with goals within Montana together.
I have to say though, I was thinking about this a lot, and we have done a lot of marketing around Libby and around training people, and this is a pilot, and I'm just not sure how much marketing we are going to do at the Great Falls Public Library to try to get people to transfer to yet another item that we may or may not go with. And so I want to really support this pilot, but I don't want to teach my mom how to use another app. And if we're not going to, we're not sure that we're going to stay with it. So.
That's fair questions.
So I don't know that usage is going to be as reflective as it would be if we did a robust marketing.
Yeah, I guess that brings a question for me. I thought we were talking about just a handful of initial libraries for this pilot, not all the libraries.
Yeah, we were, but
okay.
Yeah, but I think it applies no matter which libraries we go with. Mm-hmm. They do have that issue of training their patrons. Right? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm thinking kind of in terms of that end user, can they provide like good rational arguments for, like on the one hand, who is this actually or primarily designed for, and how is it going to improve their current experience? It's kind of this question of why are we going this route instead of expanding on what we already have? And I'm thinking also about just like the user design, because the needs of a typical public library patron are going to be different from a Montana state employee or an academic patron. Like, is there going to be one kind of main design that they're going with? Like, this is kind of like the main user, or are they going to try to hit all different potential users with the same design, in which case, I just can't imagine it's going to go overly smoothly, you know what I mean? If I'm going there for state publications or if I'm going there for a novel, is it going to be as equally easy to find those things?
Yeah, I think so. What you're saying, Cody, is like for the end user, they may have different needs, and is this system flexible enough to kind of reveal the content that they need at that point in time? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Other questions, concerns, things you want me to report back on?
they were working on having audiobooks available?
Mhm.
Is that functional now?
I don't believe it is. I've not heard that it is.
I can't remember which quarter this year they said it was going to be functional. I know it's sometime this year.
That's a good point.
I have a data point to suggest, and
Okay.
also I'd like to share a question from the shared catalog staff.
Okay.
So the data point that I'm very interested in is in terms of collection development, can we measure the impact of spending money in the DPLA marketplace as opposed to a vendor like Overdrive? Because I think that is potentially the greatest impact I would like to see, which could resolve a lot of our issues with working with publishers and getting more mileage out of our collection development budget. So when we show that we are serving more people with the same amount of money from DPLA.
There be more people and more content.
Well, it could be more content, or it could be the same content that we were able to provide to more people, or to fill holds faster.
Right. Because we know that there's all of the public domain content that you can access.
Did I capture it, Karen?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I think that's kind of something I want to polish with the selection committee, but that's the gist.
No, that's a good one.
So the question that was raised when I shared this with the shared catalog staff was about having access to the physical items in the catalog and having access to the e-content in the catalog, and is there any concern with segregating those collections? Or is that not a concern, that patrons have an expectation that they can go to this app for e-content and they can go to this app to access their catalog? Is that okay, or is the ultimate goal to have everything in one bucket?
That's a good question.
Well, data from when we had the art record in the shared catalog was that very few people were accessing the content through the shared catalog. Is that still true? That's
Was it like actually the way that they have to use the record to get to the
Yeah.
item, or was it just that they don't expect to find it?
Yeah. And will it be different with a different collection?
Any other feedback from online or in the room? All right. And again, as always, I mean, if you think of something, because I know that happens to me, I'll think of something after the meeting, don't hesitate to shoot me an email or give me a call. I will happily add it to the list. It was a good conversation, both about success and the questions we need to consider as we implement this pilot to kind of have a better chance of success. So the next item on the agenda is the OCLC recommendations. I'm just going to pause here and see if Barry Brown is the University of Montana representative. He really wanted to be a part of this OCLC conversation, but I don't see him, and I suspect with his new duty as acting Dean of Libraries, he probably isn't going to be able to join us. So we'll go ahead and discuss the OCLC contract. To give you a little bit of history, we negotiated a statewide contract with OCLC probably back in the late 90s. Kind of looking at Colette, because I suspect she was part of the networking task force. It's okay, Colette. I feel that way too when people ask me how long I've really been associated with the state library. Oh my gosh.
It's a good thing. It's just hard to recognize the number of years that
Yes.
have passed.
Yeah, it is. It was a big deal, quite frankly, to get the statewide contract. At that point in time, there weren't necessarily a lot of shared catalogs. Technology was different. to be able to make it possible for every library in Montana to be able to use OCLC services to catalog items, to make them accessible, to have standard records, to use OCLC for interlibrary loan, and to make it as affordable as possible was a pretty big achievement. And it was really fairly heavily used. But then the shared catalog started to grow, and other shared catalogs came along, like Omni and now Alma, and libraries started sharing differently. And there are some libraries that still use OCLC very strongly and very faithfully, but there's enough mass right now that Kara has mentioned the data sort of is supporting that the existing contract that we have with OCLC, that we have for one more year, is probably not best for us. That in all honesty, we're probably paying more money than we should for what we're getting out of it. And I think her summary document does a good job of highlighting just how expensive it is per interlibrary loan for the OCLC. I mean, we now have libraries who have taken down the walls, and so a patron just places a hold. They don't have to go through first search and request an interlibrary loan or go up to the front desk. And like I said, there are absolutely exceptions to that. But then there's also the issue of it impacts the copy cataloging, as now those libraries and shared catalogs, you know, if one person downloads the record from OCLC into the shared catalog, then all the rest of the libraries just have to say, I own a copy of this and here's where it is. They're not copy cataloging, really. And so we knew that this was a pretty important conversation to have, because in many ways OCLC is kind of sacred. We've used it for many, many years. It's been a long-time library vendor. But we really kind of suspect that it's no longer in its existing format serving us the way we need to be served. And so we wanted to start that conversation with this group and just kind of get your thoughts on this. Before I do that, though, I'm just going to look to Karen and ask you if there's anything in particular you would like to add, or even to hand it off to you to have you ask the NAC to address.
A couple of things. First of all, I want to be perfectly clear that this is not a conversation about taking away services from people who are actively using them or making them out of reach financially. We will continue to negotiate a contract that provides affordable access to services that people need from OCLC. It's more a matter of looking at the contract and seeing that there are libraries that are not making any use of the contract in some ways that are probably areas where we could seek to negotiate a savings so that that money could be put to better use, because that this contract will continue to increase in value in terms of what OCLC is charging us. We are not seeing proportionate increase in use, or rather the way that people are using OCLC and the way that people are cataloging within the shared catalog has changed, so that we need to think, how do we make sure that we're paying for what we really need, and maybe negotiating alternative ways to access services that people do not regularly need. So that is, I think that's my question for you, is if we have some creative ideas on how we can provide access. For example, the schools, for various reasons, do not use interlibrary loan. And yet, if they're in the shared catalog, they are paying for group services, which includes unlimited interlibrary loan, and that's not a value to them. So is there a different way to provide that option to schools, but to reduce or mitigate the amount that they're paying in for that service? That was not really a very direct question.
Well, I think it's kind of a hard thing to wrap your head around, really.
Can it be part of the formula if for breaking down their costs? If we know it's not by choice, but it's, I mean, for factors that they can't really control, that they can't utilize it, that could be split out, or is that way too simple? realistic.
We could do that, but then that cost would have to be passed on to somebody else.
Yeah.
So OCLC wouldn't be willing?
It's possible. We haven't approached them about this in the last 3 years at least.
Yeah, I guess first ask them, but then maybe make an estimate of what, spreading out the cost to others. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on how much it would be to spread it out.
I have two naive questions. One, is the group services contract necessary any longer? Is that kind of like a question? And if the group services contract wasn't necessary anymore, is it a contract just for the shared catalog? And like I said, it's kind of a naive question because I don't remember the fine details about it. But
Well, I think one of my observations is OCLC is of great value to libraries not in a shared system. And I admit I like that it's a service we're providing for them, that we're negotiating this contract on their behalf. So I guess I would say I think there's a need for a group services contract. I don't think there's a need for all the bells and whistles we have. And I think that, the schools don't really need the interlibrary loan. I think there might be a few exceptions, but, they shouldn't be paying for that. The copy cataloging is a little trickier, but I'm wondering if we could negotiate with OCLC some kind of model that takes into account the shared catalog, but which might mean that those libraries in the shared catalog don't have copy cataloging. I'm not totally sure what that would look like. And maybe that's why this is such a tough question, is there's so many variables.
well, and so the other question I had was, with the contract ending a year from now, does it require a full RFP process, or is it a sole source? And how many questions can you afford to ask OCLC ahead of a competition for the business?
I think that's a fantastic point, Hule. We have a sole source now with OCLC, but there are other options in the marketplace, and I think we would probably be disingenuous to the procurement process if we stated otherwise.
Right. So I would hesitate to ask OCLC any questions that would seem like we're beginning to negotiate a future contract. And maybe use the RFP process to see what's possible when it's clear. I love this data because it's clear who's using the services that are provided in the contract and for what. And so based on RFP priorities on what those needs are, and then let the procurement process tease out what the contract actually will be and who it will be with.
So we're not in the shared catalog, which may change. But when we interlibrary loan things, we definitely do the majority of our interlibrary loaning from courier libraries. But we do really value the fact that one of my librarians got this very rare thing from Yale University just a couple months ago, and so I would hate to see. I think that is such a valuable thing for us to be able to provide to people, and so although use is going down, I really feel like it's a super valuable thing for us to be able to connect outside of the shared catalog as well as. So it doesn't sound like that's what we're not talking about interlibrary loan going away.
No, but there are definitely groups that are not using it at all.
Right.
For one reason or another. I'm really curious about the Trails group, and I don't want to put Pamela on the spot, right? Because I asked her about this sort of a circumspect way a couple of months ago, and I did get some interesting collecting data from Trails and also just through our OCLC stats. And I was surprised to see how interlibrary loan has decreased among academic libraries, and there was kind of a suggestion that there was more sharing, sharing articles and sharing things electronically, but also that they were perhaps placing more holds in the ILS, just as our catalog libraries do. And I think that this is an opportunity to kind of look ahead and think in the next 5 years, how is resource sharing going to change for these big consortia, and what kind of contract do we need to support that kind of sharing, and how do the academics, how will they continue to need something like OCLC 5 years from now? What do they need from this contract, and how's that changing?
Just a small question, Pamela.
But you didn't want to put me on the spot, right? So,
and you don't have to answer that question, but I need to know more on it than I do about how resource sharing is being talked about and developed in Trails.
yeah, it's well, it's still a little messy. So to be, frank, but it's getting better all the time. Yeah, right. I mean, the stats reflect that they can do a lot within the library services platform now. But there are still things like local considerations that haven't been ironed out. So, I mean, I guess as far as looking ahead and what will be needed from OCLC, probably our ILL committee or resource sharing committee would be better able to speak to this. I'm sure that's not going to go away ever. They're always going to need WorldCat and the like, or whatever they call it now. But I mean, if you want a more specific response, I can get that for you. Would that help?
Yeah, any information that they can share would be really valuable.
Let me pose that to the right people, because at this point I'm not sure that we know. And your time span is what, you would say 5 years, or you were saying more immediately since the contract is coming up?
Yeah, the contract renewal is next year.
Yeah.
And so the renewal is next year, which could be for any interval of years, but thinking about what do we need in this contract for the next 3 years, maybe.
Okay. Let me talk to some folks, and then I'll summarize it and get it back to you. It's break next week, so I don't know if I'll be able to get it that fast, but what's your absolute die-by deadline?
Yeah, I would say.
I think we have a few months to work on this.
Okay. Cool.
Labor Day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And not to put our school librarians on the spot, but do you receive any value from OCLC? Do you use it at all? Your peers?
We do not. Again, I would probably want to ask that question of others, whether or not they would like to see some changes and then not change their opinion of their use, or
That would be great. Check back with her. It sounds like she had a classroom in her library, so it's probably tricky. And what about our special libraries?
I think we're satisfied. I mean, I know we use it a lot and satisfied, and
That's what
I mean, Stefan would be the source for the more
particular features, but I know we're using ILL all the time. So I think thumbs up from us, but I can check this, make sure to see if he has any input.
Good. And then, for our public libraries, and I think actually Jody and Cody and Sonia and Stacy, you are all in libraries in the MSC. So do you still see value in OCLC? And if so, how?
We do. A lot of interlibrary we send out. We don't get as much in return. But because we're part of, our group is part of a little mini sharing group, we don't have to do as many interlibrary ones as we once did. But I confess I'm one of those catalogers that is having a little bit of a heart attack.
No, that's why we're having this conversation. We don't want anyone to have a heart attack.
I don't want to learn cataloging at this stage in my life.
Yeah, and I know for us in Billings, we'd be much more interested in looking at ways of making OCLC more viable of an option for us. We don't do a lot of ILL stuff now, although we do want to try to make it more feasible. So I think we would definitely be interested in looking at OCLC and seeing, what really can it do for us that we can't do, kind of ourselves or do more efficiently here, I guess.
Stacy warned me she might be in a place without good coverage. I don't know, Sonia, if you're still here, if you would like to weigh in about the value of OCLC. Either the ILL or the cataloging, actually, because we are talking about both of those things. And while she's typing, we've kind of spent a fair amount of time talking about ILL, but there is the cataloging question. Are there any concerns or thoughts or questions about the cataloging piece? Like, don't forget this, we really need it.
Well, as a library that's outside of the shared catalog, I mean, I don't know what we, like, the thought of it going away makes me.
Yeah.
It's not going away.
It's not going away.
I don't want to start any rumors.
The nauseous factor of, but I really see a value of us examining, I absolutely don't want everybody in the shared catalog to be paying an exorbitant fee so that we and 6 other non-shared catalog libraries can do our catalog. I mean, that's not fair. So I think it's a really good idea to look at trying to tweak the system to make it more equitable, and we shouldn't be paying for stuff that we're not using for sure.
And that's what started this conversation, is that we are paying for stuff we're not using.
I guess I don't know how a la carte OCLC lets you.
That was one of my questions, Susie. If we do go down the path of an RFP, do you decouple cataloging and ILL?
Yeah.
I
think you would have to.
personally think you would. Yeah.
And that was, I was trying to see, I'm not understanding necessarily the spreadsheet with the cataloging usage, but how much original cataloging demand do we have, even just for state publications or unique Montana created items that we would be the authority for. And so that would be interesting to know.
This is Elizabeth. Have you considered, or have you already consulted with the cataloging committee, the executive cataloging committee? Because I think they would have good input on this.
Yes, that's a great suggestion, and I don't think that the CMC really addressed this at their recent meeting. I have discussed this with the shared catalog staff as a preliminary with you. How could we make this more streamlined within the MSC? I think if we came out with some material, like questions, what do we really need in terms of original cataloging, and what do we need in terms of holdings registration within the MSC, that we might have something ready to put on their agenda in August. But yeah, that input would be really valuable.
Yeah. I just want to, there were a couple of chats I want to make sure that I share. Eva says that she uses OCLC for cataloging for the MSC and also for ILL, but that they only have a few ILLs a month. And Sonia says her cataloger says it works great for cataloging in ILL, but that it is an MSC discussion. So I think if I could summarize, and if I forgot something, if you'll let me know, we should talk to, and Pamela will get us in touch with the resource sharing group of Trails to kind of hear more about the needs of academic libraries. That Kate is willing to contact her school libraries that she represents to see if they're using it and what they think. That we will talk to the Content Management Committee of the Montana Shared Catalog to kind of get their perspective. That people don't have a problem with seeing what's possible in renegotiating the contract and see if we can maybe come to some sort of balance where we're not paying so much for services that aren't being used. That ILL and cataloging is still very important to our special library friends, so we need to make sure that they have access to it. And that we should decouple interlibrary loan and cataloging, and that we should go through an RFP process just to sort of see what's out there. Did I miss anything? Any other comments or questions?
What does RFP stand for?
Request for proposal.
And when you said that too, I mean, if the known providers are known, that we wouldn't necessarily have to do an RFI, a request for information.
Right.
And yeah, I just wondered if it's coming up on, like, is it the 10th year of the contract?
Yeah, I don't
Because
think
the
we're
last time I remember talking about it was Sarah.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite at 10, but that doesn't mean we can't. So I think all of these requests for information from all of us are great. Maybe we should make those information requests in the framework of an RFP so that we're getting really concrete information from these groups to help inform what that RFP looks like. And this is great timing to do this because we really wouldn't have to go out to RFP until the fall at the very earliest. So, yeah.
I would just like to throw out there one crazy idea. I think that a ton of us use copy cataloging, and that many of us, most of us, there's a few exceptions, get something special that we have to do original cataloging on, and we go, oh my God, and it goes in a pile. And if we're looking at streamlining this, I mean, what if we put money into having like a cataloger that we all took pictures of stuff, sent it in, they did the original cataloging, rather than, I mean, trying to train a person at every single library in the state to do original cataloging, and we get mixed. I mean, I'm good at a lot of things, not a very good original cataloger, and when you only do it every so often, it is such a time suck. So if when we were looking at the OCLC contract, if there was some sort of, way we could say we want 1 or 2 locations where we can upload, and the other locations where we're pulling, that would be something I think a lot of libraries would be interested in, because I just think having that skill level at every single small library, including the big libraries, just, I don't see it as particularly cost effective.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it is.
The state library hasn't had a cataloger on staff for, I don't know, 5 years probably. We use Backstage Solutions. No, it's Backstage something, Backstage Library Services or something.
Well, I
contract out all of our cataloging.
Yeah, I've been threatening to be like, okay, anytime somebody gives me something special, I'm like, I need 2 copies because I'm sending one to Beth Boyson. And as soon as she puts it in OCLC, I will put it in my catalog.
Sonia says yes to the original cataloger idea.
Yeah.
You're not the only one.
Kara may know this too, but I'm pretty sure Steph and Lucidra mentors people on the process.
Well, yeah,
And he
there's
does,
lots of-
if you send him something, he will do it too.
Oh. And I'm not offering him for the statewide. That is great. But you can offer that service on a contract.
Right.
For service. Are you charging? No.
Yep,
Right,
great
and the
idea.
mentoring is great, but do we really want to mentor
Yeah.
people in every single?
It's a special skill set. Yeah. And if you don't do it very often, you're not going to remember.
And I know I put the period and the comma and the
Yeah.
what, you know.
I don't even know the punctuation anymore.
Oh.
It's been,
No, it's been too long.
yeah, way too long.
No, it is a good idea.
When I was at Brickell, there was, which is the Research Institute for Public Libraries, somebody said, you know, when we look at all the staff time that is put in to making sure our MARC records have the right periods and the right commas, do our patrons care?
No.
Like, what is the ROI on that?
Yeah.
That's very low. I mean, it matters. I mean, I'm embarrassed when I put up a record and it's not very good, but I don't think my patrons care if I've got all the info in there. So.
If OCLC provided an original cataloging service.
But
Yeah, it
that's
was timely
something that
and fast.
You could easily integrate into an RFP where the cataloging service had a contract vendor or could work with a contract vendor.
I think so.
Yeah, there are a few libraries that make great use of their, and everybody has original cataloging in their contract. Some libraries make great use of it. Stephen, Paulette, Dave. We have, you know, we can count them probably on our hand or 2 hands. How many people are like, the experts in original cataloging in our state, and do we all need that access, or is it we don't really know what the value of that particular service is because OCLC doesn't break that up for us, but could that translate to we can outsource all of our original cataloging, you know, with a few exceptions, to
Right, it'd have to be something that was easy, like you wouldn't, I would hate to have to ship the materials, but with the digital, pictures, front, back, title page.
I know we've talked here at Billings about kind of the future of cataloging as well. And it's something we're interested in. I mean, realizing that we have Dave, which is great, but him and some of the other people are getting close to retirement, planning on retirement, and really starting to think about what's going to happen when they're gone. We've talked briefly about it, so it's definitely a topic we would be interested in doing more on or thinking more about.
Yep, that's a really good point, Cody. All of those people that Kara listed, I think, are getting close to retirement. Except for Stephen.
I know.
You may have to do the contract vendor thing.
Imagine them hire a contract what did they do when Janice retired? That's my question.
Oh, they just hired it with like a library tech, materials handler, not a cataloger. I'm not sure how they're handling their original catalog. All right, anything else with the OCLC? I guess for Kara, does this give you enough to feel confident going forward to negotiate? Okay. Okay, money. That's next up on the topic is the FY19 LSTA LDD budget. And I was pretty excited when we actually heard about our award in January, that we were getting our FY19 award. As many of you know, sometimes it's May before we hear that. So that was pretty exciting. But because we are in the midst of a legislative session and just have a lot going on, I didn't feel comfortable allocating everything. So I'm treating this as a two-step process. So my first kind of thing for the NAC is, are you okay with that budget that I presented with the personnel and kind of our contractual obligations? And then the second piece of this is, I would kind of like to know your ideas and priorities for how we allocate the roughly $98,000, give or take, that we have available to spend to benefit libraries and Montanans. And so my first question for you, and I will go ahead and pull up the PDF of the spreadsheet, is I sort of, let me make this bigger. I went ahead and I allocated the funds the way we have in the past. And so that includes putting in, the LSTA with the OCLC group services, which, as you can see, I made a note that this is more LSTA than we've done in the past. And that's because we put in a little extra money to OCLC to reduce the cost for libraries last year, but we didn't want them to get hit all of a sudden with a huge percentage increase in their bill. So by putting in this just shy of $60,000, it limits their increase to 5% over last year. And then this is a new item, the Public Library Statistics Vendor Solution. This is something we ended up doing just because, based on my research, we lost a lot of staff capacity with the budget cuts to be able to do this in-house. And so we went through a process, a limited solicitation process, to find a vendor who could help handle our public library statistics. And so this cost has been added. Some of these are ones you've seen year after year. These different projects are the things that these trainings or things people have indicated to us that they are very interested in, like our MSL Fall Workshop, which would be, again, this coming year, and then Directors Institute. This was based on our conversation we had back in August, where we compared the Leadership Institute and the Directors Institute. We really want to do board development support, so I included funding for trustee training. I included a budget for Amelia to be able to do lifelong learning training, our Web Junction online, and then this is something Jenny and I took a chance on and said yes. The Colorado State Library kind of contacted us about hosting a regional Ripple. And they pay for a lot of hosting. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So we are going to host a regional research institute for public libraries, and so I needed to put a budget in for that. We took a chance that you would approve.
Where would it be?
The regional Ripple, we have arranged for it to be in Billings, at the Billings Public Library. So
That's very cool.
yes, it is very cool. And then we have, these are again ones that you've seen typically with the Montana Memory Project, our DPLA membership and our Content DM software and digitization for new collections. This is the Lyrasis hosting fee for the DPLA pilot. This is Coltax funds, not LSTA funding, by the way. And then we do pay in for the Overdrive annual hosting fee, but the libraries themselves are paying in for the content. I'm doing like a real kind of high level, but for some of you, this is the first time you're seeing the library development budget. And so if there are any pieces of it that you're like, what is this about, please let me know. This is Amelia's position, the lifelong learning librarian, and this budget is for her to be able to do things like we have a shout bomb, which texts early literacy tips for parents to use with their kids to build their kids' skills. Amelia has used it in a variety of other ways with different programs that she's had. So this is her money that allows her to buy things she needs to have programs in a box for libraries to be able to use. And that is pretty much it. And so my question for you, or questions for you, is, are you okay with this allocation as is? do you want to move any of the LSTA funded things to coal tax funds, which we could do. There are some risks, I'll be honest. Coal tax funding has been a little more stable, but honestly in years past it's been volatile and has led to some hard decisions, which is why I kind of recommend that if you shift anything from LSTA into coal tax funds, that you shift something that you might, like if something happens and we get less revenue, you're okay with letting go of it, for instance. Like, that's why I put
So like
some
with the ripple, can we get rid of that? I mean, that would be a big thing.
well,
We wouldn't want it, and that would be probably the last thing to go, right?
and right now that's why I put all the trainings under LSTA. Because what librarians have said to us is they really love and value the continuing education we offer. So I put it all under an LSTA, but training is an area where it tends to come later in the year, which is nice for the coal tax funds for cash flow purposes. And some of the trainings are things that we, if the money wasn't there for coal tax, we could cancel them if we had to. Whereas I hesitate to put things that we feel are critical on coal tax. I don't think it will be a problem based on our experiences. We're not hearing anything that will be a problem. But some of you were at the table when we had to decide to let go of databases, and it was because the funding just went away. And so I just want to be honest with you that, of course, that lingers. I'm not saying it's a given. Yeah.
I wanted to clarify about the timeline. So this is fiscal year 20 coal tax.
Yes.
So that it has to be spent by June 30th, right?
Yep. 20 or 21. Right? 2020. Yes.
So, but all of these things would fall within either one of those time frames for the fund.
Yes.
So my feeling would be that if the activities are aligned with priorities and they're valued and are going to do great things, then the budgetary decisions can be made by the managers and the commission as appropriate as those variations or fluctuations come up.
Okay. So my interpretation of that is you don't have a problem with the things I put on LSTA right now. No, they're priorities, and you're okay with that. Okay.
I'll speak for myself in that case.
Okay. And for those of you online, do you have anything you'd like to add? Or you also are like, yeah, we're okay with that being LSTA funded? All right, I will take silence as agreement. Okay, so then we can move on to the fun stuff, which is...
Pamela said has the chat succession planning.
Yeah, and Pamela, is that like to add to the possible funding ideas?
Oh, sorry, that was a little while ago. No, that's when you were talking about, Cody was talking about planning for others to be coming up the, what am I trying to say? When people are going to be retiring,
Great
or
point.
be training.
Yep, no, that is a great point, Pamela. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm doing 10 things at once. You're gonna flip. Okay.
Yep, I am. Well, that's okay. So what I need probably before we move into the funding ideas and how we're going to allocate the $98,000, I do need action from you approving or not the budget that I presented so far with the spreadsheet. And of course, once we've kind of come up with our ideas and priorities for the funding, then I'll work with staff to get your amounts to it. And then in May, I'll bring basically the allocation of the rest of the funding to you. So I would appreciate, if you feel comfortable doing so, some kind of action on this budget as presented so that I can take it to the commission at their April meeting. Does anyone feel comfortable moving to approving budget as presented?
I move to
Thank you, Jody.
budget as presented.
Do I have a second?
I would love to second that.
Thank you, Colette. Any further discussion? So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And if those who are opposed, please say nay or type nay in the chat box.
N-A-Y, not N-E-I-G-H.
Oh, come on. That would be really funny. Now someone online is like, oh, I want to do that.
Sorry, it's getting towards the afternoon. We need to lighten things up. A little levity here.
Good. We need that. Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, fun stuff. Let's talk about how we might want to allocate the $98,000 that we have. And I have up here, I'm just going to pull up a document so that I can take notes again. So what I did in the memo was I posted the ideas you had given me last time, along with some ideas from staff about different ways to spend this funding. And so my goal for this discussion that we have is to get from you basically your top 5 priorities of where you would like to spend this money with enough detail that I know what you're actually thinking about and what you want. And I'd like it to relate to the LSTA goals and the State Library Strategic Framework, which gives you pretty much a lot of playroom as well. And I would like the list prioritized so that we know. Piece of cake, right? So my first question for you is, do we need to add anything to this list of funding library ideas? And this is straight from the memo. I just put it in a Word document so that we could see it pretty easily. You'll see some of these on here are ones that you kind of mentioned.
Bullet number 4.
Yeah, exactly. Any new ideas to be thrown up here and considered? You had talked, Susie, about the homelessness. Would you like me to throw that?
Oh,
The programming and discourse?
I think that would be programming around the movie. Yeah.
Anything else?
So is the contract for this done?
Mhm.
So I think that kind of goes along with the last one, contracting around economic development, workforce experience. It's continuing some of the good messaging and the connections with decision makers, local government, or
Yeah, the thinking behind that idea, it came out of the public awareness campaign. Someone who's active in the economic development community contacted us and asked what kinds of opportunities there were to continue that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Tracy and I talked about was the fact that we don't have anyone on staff with economic development expertise or someone who's already known to that community that could help to further those relationships.
Yeah.
And we already have a contract to support early literacy. Might we use that as a model for something to continue to support with economic development?
I think that would be really interesting to develop that idea and keep that going, because soon enough we'll be in the interim again. And I think this, in my mind, at least my perception of this messaging is really successful, well received, and it actually hit the target audiences. I wonder too about, like kind of we were talked about early learning, but also when you're talking about shout bomb too, do we have the opportunity to do more outreach to our aging population too through some of those technology mediated tools? And I just think about my oldest uncle who's 83 years old, and he's on Facebook and Instagram and that sort of thing, like 24/7, and that sort of technology might be something that would be useful to help connect people with, whether it's legal advice or taxes or healthcare information too. So reaching out to the aging population. I think we were talking about BTOP earlier, kind of echoes of BTOP and the great partnership that we have with AARP as part of that. So that made me think of that too. And there's ties to economic development expertise as well.
So I sort of highlighted those two just for possible consideration as priorities.
I have a question. This is Pamela.
Yeah.
Would it be worthwhile at all to explore some kind of partnership with Rev Up?
Oh, what is that?
Does anybody? I'm not real familiar with it. I'm just now. It's some kind of $25 million investment apparently in Montana. They're improving student return on investment and reducing the skills gap reported by employers. So I thought it's something through the U.S. Department of Labor that is being done, I assume in cooperation with the state.
Rev
Up, it's REVUP. Yeah. I don't know if there's room for collaboration or not, but they've already got something, set up in part.
Any other funding ideas and or just things you would like to see prioritized? And, I didn't allocate any amount for new MSC libraries, by the way, so, which traditionally we do, although it's kind of tricky because we have to get a quote from NINIS, which is based on who applies and all that kind of fun stuff.
Didn't we put a year moratorium on joining the shared catalog?
We did, but that would end with the start of this budget.
Well, then I definitely think we should allocate money for it. And that is completely facetious because I have a conflict of interest.
I think it would be a great idea.
I think it would be a
to end the moratorium
on
joining the shared catalog and prioritize funding to help assist those.
Note even the notes. There's not me that can.
The only other idea I haven't, I always feel a little bit bad contributing ideas, but we've got this gigabit toolkit, and maybe we should have a little bit of funding available if there's some opportunities that we see coming out of the study. We could maybe help to.
I think that would be a great idea.
Anyone? Okay.
Development.
Oh, good. I can't see those of you who are online, so if you're shaking your head no, please let me know. The people in the room are saying, yeah, they're good with that. Some of us are just okay. Sonia said yes. Any other thoughts?
Tracy, I think we briefly discussed this, and this has been on my Asana board for a while, but mental health training, I don't know if that's, I know that's something that people have expressed interest in.
Didn't we vote about the CIT training last time?
Yes, we did. You do have that funding for the crisis intervention training.
Do I?
Yes.
Wait, I thought that was redistributed.
No, it's still there for you.
Oh, okay.
I did not realize. I will look at that again.
Do you see why I need focus for Amelia? She's got so much on her plate.
Sorry, I didn't realize that's just sitting there. I will work on using that.
I should have checked in with you and said, don't forget it.
Okay.
So that covers that, because that is about mental health kind of training issues. Anything else? So amongst these, the ones highlighted right now, what I have heard and seen more than one person nod their head and say yes, are the things that we think are worth putting some funds toward.
I guess I'm also going to say I would really like to have us do some more civil conversation discourse work. I think that that's really essential right now, and that's a place where I think we can make a mark. When we were talking about, there's people that pay the bills and people that use the services, I think that this sort of thing reaches both and can, as much as we don't want to completely cater to upper middle class people, I think showing them that they also get value from the library is really important, and I think that is one of the key things that we can do.
Okay.
2020 coming up fast, and it's already so ugly.
Yeah.
It's already so ugly. Yeah.
Sad. Okay. Those of you online, you've been fairly quiet. Is there anything on this list that you would like me to highlight for the group to consider?
I would always highlight the memory project increasing public scanning events and possibilities. And my bias there is that a couple weeks ago is one of the photos that was shared was my grandfather's logging company.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So and then that just led to this whole really incredible family conversation around this photo that was shared, and people, old friends and old employees kind of connecting and that. So it's a wonderful thing, not just that they're accessible, but that they're shared, and it generates those conversations and good feelings, and they're clearly identified as coming from a program of the state library.
Any other items on the list that you would like me to highlight? And are you thinking this one, Colette, or I added a new one, but maybe we do that one?
It can, any outreach and increasing of the collections. The oral history part would be really amazing, especially in Native communities, and addressing language preservation potentially as well. Being good partners in that.
So here's kind of what you have. Allocated amount for MSC New Libraries, support services for older adults, support scaling some of the civil conversations and or discourse work, support StoryCorps and oral history collections in the MMP, contract with someone with economic development workforce experience, and set aside a little funding to implement any ideas that might come out of the completion of the Gigabit Toolkit. So that's actually 6 right there. Last call for any additions.
I don't have an addition, but I would say that the homelessness programming is probably also worthwhile.
Okay.
I don't see that getting any better.
No, I think you're right.
And that's a pretty timely, like it's not very often that we get a Hollywood blockbuster that can help spark conversation
Yes.
around an important issue.
Yeah, you're right.
So
It's true. Okay. All right, one more call. Anything else you want me to highlight? So what I would love to know is your top 4 of these. Oh man, I know. I mean, I'll take them all to staff. I mean, we don't know what kind of funding dollars we might need, but I would like to know your priorities. And if you'd like, let me just pull these out here so they're separate and you can see them all in one place.
So can I ask a question
Yeah.
that might be useful for the NEC to consider is the staff that will need to be involved in each of these projects. So I see a lot that would be put on Amelia's plate.
Yes.
And are these time bound in a way that might be overwhelming for anyone on staff?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm like, well, that's a lot of lifelong learning stuff.
yeah, no, that's
That should be a consideration is like, what can we do within this time frame?
Yes. So your top 3 can't be all lifelong learning. Your top 4.
So the economic development, that's not lifelong learning, is it?
Well,
Or is it?
no, I mean, we would hire someone. I'd probably have Amelia be their point person.
Oh, so that is
But-
still adding to her plate.
It is, although I don't see it adding to her plate in the same way as like the civil discourse or the homelessness or the services for older adults. Yeah, it's true. You really can't do any of these without adding work to somebody's plate, in all honesty, which I appreciate. And I feel comfortable with this group coming back and saying, okay, we said we would do this, but we can't do it all, so what's really important to you once we get into it?
This wouldn't reduce the amount of work or anything, but is the programming around public kind of fall under the civil discourse? Is that, I don't know. I mean, it's still going to be work no matter what, probably the same person, but is it kind of, is the programming in order for people to talk about it? I don't know.
I thought that because I know there's a couple of libraries in Montana who've done really powerful discourse programs about topics like homelessness or the opioid epidemic and so forth.
Sonia brings up another of those key public issues of suicide and suicide prevention.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers aren't improving.
No, they're not.
At our library, though, for the suicide prevention, we have been borrowing the MSU Extension agent, Allison, and she's got this whole thing, the Montana Thrive, and she comes in, she goes, well, Amelia doesn't have to do any of it. So that might be, you know, I don't know how many Allisons we have, but good point.
Yeah, you know, this is Pamela again. I kind of feel like they're different issues, and that civil conversations is teaching people how to put their political views aside and talk to one another in a civil manner. But you've got those whole other issues, almost more critical, I would say, which is the homeless and the mental illness and the suicide. That's social services, right? And that's, who was it, San Francisco, I don't know, Minneapolis, a number of libraries, they're hiring social workers on their staff now, which is what I figured they would do a long time ago. But not everybody can do that, not everybody has that in their town, but I mean, how about some kind of pilot program or contracting with, local, what do you call it, HRDC or whoever it is? I don't know, maybe, because you don't have the expertise necessarily within the library, but we do have those people at our library, so.
Yeah, and Pamela, Jill Flick found this great gentleman who's going to be teaching at one of our MSL workshops this year, and he talks about social services in the library, and he's kind of focuses on concrete things librarians can do, which we thought would be really useful for especially our small libraries that are out there by themselves, but still facing these issues.
Nice.
Yeah. And that is a good point, that most of these are on Amelia's plate. That makes a difference.
What can we put? What can we put on your plate, Tara?
Oh, I think that's going to be the MSC new library.
Yeah, it's going to need some libraries to apply to join the MSC.
Having, said that though, I think if this is something really important to you, Amelia and I can sit down and talk about how to make it possible. Like maybe we can't do something grand, but we can do something small that other libraries can do.
And not everything that I'm working on right now is urgent. Yeah, there's room to move things around.
It is very efficient.
Do you mind scrolling down one more time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so I'm looking at it, and I'm feeling, do we want to put money amount? Like, how much, just when we're rating, like, do we want, like, do we get to pick one thing that has a huge price tag, or are we picking all the things, or
I think
like,
we'd be hard pressed for us to come up with a dollar amount. Not
okay, so we're not paying attention to how much they cost. We're just saying what's most important to us.
Right, and your most important thing that you get out of us right now is a priority list.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. We have dots or stickies that we can go up with.
I almost did that, and then I was like, how am I going to do that for the online folks? And I thought, they're going to have to type in 1 through 4, and so the rest of you can write down your 1 through 4, and then tell me. And so what I'll do is I'll go through, here's what I'll do. So those of you who are online, you're going to use the chat box, and you're just going to do 1 through 4, 1 your highest priority, 2 second highest, blah, blah, blah. And then I am going to basically just put little counts by each of these. And for those of you that are in the, do you have a suggestion?
I have a suggestion to change the bullets to numbers.
Okay, I can do that.
And then collapse the ribbon so we can see more of the list.
And actually, do you want me to just take out the ones that didn't make the cut?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that they aren't important.
Right.
And they will happen, I'm sure.
Okay. So, and I will just do, there we go. These are the ones that you highlighted. Did you see that, Kara?
Yeah, that's more work for me.
Sorry, not sorry.
You brought the hashtag.
We moved beyond hashtags here.
Oh, we have transcended beyond simple social.
So for the record, I just had I don't know. I tried to put this list in before and like overloaded GoToMeeting. so I had like lots of jokes and like quips and great things that they're just gone now. So this is what you have.
We're so disappointed.
Yeah. It is the
I know.
Did you actually type
Like,
it in?
no, I didn't. I was going to try to talk, but per usual, a general life rule, we can just blame Microsoft on this one. So that's what I'm doing.
Ooh, Elizabeth knows how to be efficient.
Four, we get four.
Mm-hmm. Do. So you can pick 3 more, Stacy. You can also speak if you're like in your car driving. We would be happy to hear your voice. If that's easier for you.
Don't type and drive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want us to slip you a piece of paper?
That would be great, actually. I basically wrote these down and I'm just doing little hash marks.
You sure can. Oops.
Good for you. I keep trying, but I'm not very successful at it.
Gather any
Started a trend.
mention you, so I forget. You, there's a position early on for personalities, and not that you need to do programming for them, but Valentine sorts on the level 4 upstairs is organizing a tour for some of the law clerks, and at least 1 or 2 people from the law library, and you could probably get in on that. Yeah, actually, like 2. It's, you know, if you've never been to any sort of detention center, this would be a good one.
No, I've seen Betty on the inside.
Well, I have a lot of clients.
No, I haven't. I've never been.
So her last name is Swartz, S-W-O-R.
All right, yes. Has everyone courageous enough and brave enough to vote, voted? Is that, okay, I think everyone in the room has given me theirs. But some of you online are still thinking? Do you need a little more time, or you're happy to go with the consensus of the group? I just want to make sure I give you time, because this is a hard question. right. Last call. Okay, I think that's almost all of you. So the breakdown was the number one priority of almost everyone, but it definitely was on almost everyone's list, was adding new libraries to the MSC. That's number one. So we put work on Kara's plate. Number two was the contract with someone with experience in economic development, and that was actually number one for a couple of you. And then the other two that actually tied were the civil conversations and programming regarding homelessness and perhaps mental illness as well. So with that, we will take those top four priorities, and I will work with the different staff members to kind of come up with some ideas about, I missed this one. Let me make sure this doesn't change things. Hang on. Nope, it does not change it. Okay. I will work with the staff to come up with a list of projects for you with some rough dollar amounts. And if we have more money to play with, great. I will let you know. I will actually use this list if you're okay with that. If there's some other things on the list, because the other services to older adults and the oral history StoryCorps and the Montana Memory Project were kind of next up on the list. So what I'll do if we had any more funding is I'll go to the staff members who would work on those particular issues and see if they have some ideas for you for funding. Okay? So thank you, because I know it's really hard when you're being asked to actually prioritize. So I appreciate that. So Pamela, are you okay with me giving people just like about a 10 or 15 minute break, and then I can make you the presenter and kind of you can get comfortable? Does that sound fair?
Sounds perfect.
Okay, so Pamela's going to be next up on our agenda. Just talk about trails, and this is following up on the request during the November NAC meeting, so she'll talk about that. Let's just take about like a 10-minute break. So she'll be back here at 2:13. Sure.